It's that time of year again. The Premier League season is about to begin, and I've made my predictions for the upcoming season, along with a preview for each team, as the predictions will inevitably go horribly wrong. But I've done a lot of research into this, and I think I'm going to give it a good shot. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Second, Arsenal. Arsenal coming off another second place season, and I expect them to be the most well-equipped team to challenge Man City yet again. One of the main reasons is that their defense is very strong. They upgrade on what I'd ostensibly call left back, with Calafiori coming in, and Timber will be like a new signing, providing depth all across the back line. Saliba and Gabriel were rock solid as a center back pairing, maybe the best in the league, and Ben White has proven to be a really solid right back. I think they could have upgraded on David Raya. I don't think he was elite last season, but Arsenal is a very set-piece focused team, and Raya is the best goalkeeper in the league in the air despite his small stature, so I understand why they stuck with him. But despite the good defense, that might not even be the best part of the team. Odegaard and Rice are two of the best midfielders in the league, probably the world, and they form a great unit. Odegaard is such an elite technical player, and he's become more well-rounded as well, adding some defense to his game, while Rice, the destroyer, has added some goals to his game as well. And I think that Jorginho isn't the best player in the world, but he does provide some good balance. Havertz can come into the midfield as well, and that really allows Odegaard and Rice to shine. Odegaard in particular is probably one of the best players in the world at the moment, and the midfield is very strong. However, Arsenal does kind of fall short in attack. Kai Havertz did have a good rebound season, finally getting away from Chelsea. So many Chelsea players had a rebound season last season after they left, but expecting 15 goals out of him might be too much to ask. As well, Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli both regressed, not being able to hit their marks from the previous season. You do, of course, have Bukayo Saka, but let's talk about Saka. He is a borderline world-class attacking talent with great end product, dribbling. He can even play fullback if you need him to. And we got to see that for 47 games last season. And every single game at the Euro. He is a young player, and eventually this workload is going to catch up to him. Whether that's burnout making him perform less well on the field, or hopefully not, but injuries could happen if he continues this workload. I don't think we can expect Saka to sustain this level of form. However, if he is able to replicate last season's performances, he will be one of the best players in the league. But let's talk about last season a little bit more. Everything went wrong for Man City. Haaland, De Bruyne, Rodri, Ederson, John Stones, all of them missed time. And everything went wrong for City. They had off-the-field distractions, so many injuries, so many players missing time. But despite all that, they still won the title. I don't think Arsenal will be able to get as lucky again this season, and even if they do, we saw what City were able to do. I still think Arsenal are a step or two away from being able to challenge for the title, but they are certainly on the right track. They're the clear second best team in the league, and things are going well for them. Sixth, Aston Villa. After an amazing season, the former European champions are back in the Champions League for the first time in my lifetime. And despite me predicting them to not reach the Champions League again, I expect their positive momentum to continue. Aston Villa had a great season, and while we've seen other teams outside the Big Six perform well, Aston Villa did it differently by being able to dominate the ball and really show themselves as being amongst the best teams in the league. They were able to do this in large part because of striker Ollie Watkins, 19 goals and 13 assists. Well, I don't think the assist number will be able to be replicated. He led the league last season. It does speak to how well-rounded his game is and how good he is as an attacker. But he isn't the only attacking threat on Villa. Leon Bailey is coming off a breakout campaign where he overshadowed star signing Moussa Diaby, to the point where Diaby left Villa. He had a great season. In addition, he'll be supported with Jadon Philogene, who's coming off a really solid campaign for Hull City in the Championship. I expect him to star alongside Bailey over other good wingers like Rodgers, Ramsey, and new signing Illing Jr. The attack could be very strong yet again. In midfield, they do have to deal with the absence of Douglas Luiz, but new signings Ross Barkley and Amadou Onana will help them get through it. In addition, you have John McGinn, the return of Buendia, and the eventual return of Kamara. Man, Villa had so many injuries last season. While this midfield isn't as good technically as Man City's and Arsenal's and some of the other top teams in the league, they do get the job done. And the defense is one of the best in the league. Torres and Konsa made a very strong center-back pairing last season, and they'll be boosted by the return of Tyrone Mings. Matty Cash is a very solid left-back, and you could even play Konsa there if you want to start Mings or maybe Diego Carlos, and having a more defensive right-hand side would allow left-back Ian Maatsen to push forward like he did so well for Champions League finalist Borussia Dortmund last season. And behind them, you have, in my opinion, the league's best goalkeeper in Emi Martinez. This is a very well-rounded team with a great manager that I think will continue to challenge for Europe. I don't have them in the top 4 this season because they have to balance the Premier League and Champions League, though they handled the Europa Conference League pretty well last year. In addition, their talent level just isn't at the same as some of the bigger clubs. While I like Philogene and Bailey, they're not Premier League Player of the Year contenders like wingers at some of the top clubs, and the midfield does leave a bit to be desired. That being said, I could see Aston Villa easily getting back to the top 4, and I'm really excited to see them in the Champions League this season. 14th, Bournemouth. Bournemouth are coming off a solid first season for new boss Donny Iraola. However, they are losing some good players in Dominic Solanke and Lloyd Kelly, and there haven't really been any replacements yet, though we are still early in the window. Unal looks in line to be the new striker, and he's dealing with an injury right now, and even in his past, he has been inconsistent and didn't look too good last season. However, Semenyo and Cliver did provide some goals from wing last season, so I don't think it's too much of a concern. In midfield, Alex Scott should be able to provide a bigger impact than he did last season through injury. I wouldn't hold your breath on Tyler Adams. And I think that department will improve. In addition, the defense has some very talented young players, though I do still expect them to concede a good bit. This is a team that's a bit hard to project because they did just lose a player and haven't replaced him yet, but even if they didn't replace Solanke, I still feel confident in Iraola to keep the squad up. They had a very tough task last season and were able to pull it off, and with more familiarity with this system, more experience in the Premier League, I'm expecting Bournemouth to be able to stay up pretty handily. 9th, Brentford. Last season, everything went wrong for Brentford. Tony got suspended, they had injuries upon injuries, and they massively underperformed their expected goals mark. But despite all of that, they survived. They even finished above Nottingham Forest, even if you give them their points back. And I expect them to be much better this season. They're obviously boosted by the return of Tony. Having a good striker should allow them to hit that expected goal mark, and having him on the field will make them better no matter what. In addition, they were actually able to find some goals outside of striker last season. Wissa and Mbumo looked very good, and I'm expecting them to have a great attacking line with those 3 up front. Even Keane Lewis-Potter and Kevin Schade are pretty decent depth. The attack will also be boosted by the return of left-back Rico Henry from injury and Hickey on the other side. That should give the midfield a little bit more control this season. It's hard to predict who will be in it because of how many injuries they had last season, but it's typically been good for Brentford in the past. The defense should also be stronger as they get healthier. Ben Mee and Pinnock have been solid for Brentford previously. I think Collins will look a lot better with improved continuity around him. And maybe Ayer can finally start to show off his talents. There's a lot of good players in this Brentford team, and while they are hard to gauge because of how many injuries they had last season, their underlying numbers were great. They've had a track record of success, and I'm expecting them to be a lot better this season. 10th, Brighton. Brighton and highly rated manager Roberto De Zerbi parted at the end of the season, and they have replaced him with Fabian Herzler, the youngest manager in Premier League history. Despite that, I'm predicting Brighton to improve on their finish from last year, and that's because of 2 things. 1, getting healthy, and 2, their continued amazing recruitment. Last season, Brighton were dealing with injuries to Mitoma, March, Estupiñán, and they had a lot of selection issues due to AFCON and the Asian Cup. I think they won't have as many problems this season, and that should allow them to perform better. Brighton's attacking play was their standout part of their team under De Zerbi. João Pedro proved to be a great signing at striker, Evan Ferguson feels due to break out, and Danny Welbeck can still put in a shift. And their wingers have a ton of dangerous players, led by Mitoma and boosted by new signing Menta, who looks to be a great player adding to the dangerous group of wings that Brighton have. Their midfield will feel the loss of Pascal Gross, but Matt Swifer looks to come in and boost the team, and you still have Baleba, Milner, and Billy Gilmore, who are all some very good players. The defense fits Brighton's attacking system well, but is very leaky in terms of conceding goals. At left back, I want to see one of Estupiñán or Barco really take that next step forward and become the real top-level player that I think they can be. And on the right, you have Veltman, who's a passable option defensively, but I'd really like to see one of Lamptey or especially Jack Hinchelwood take that step forward as a defensive right back along with their good attacking play. If that happens, they're both world-class right backs in my opinion. At center back, you have a lot of good players on the ball, but I think they need to really lock in defensively this season. And I think in goal, once Bart Verbruggen comes back, if he's not rotated this season, you'll see a huge improvement from him, and I think at the end of the season, you'll have a lot of at least £50 million players on this Brighton squad. There is going to be a learning curve for Herzler. He's a very young manager adjusting to the Premier League. He didn't even manage in the Bundesliga at all. And I do think that Brighton will take a little bit of time to adjust to his system. It can be very weird, especially in midfield. But this is a very talented team, and I think by the end of the season, Brighton will be in great shape. 8th, Chelsea. Chelsea had a terrible start to last season, and things were looking very bad before Pochettino's men were finally able to get things together and end the season on a high, providing them with a lot of hope for the future, and then they fired him. Fired another manager. And again, they had a summer transfer window where they brought in a ton of arrivals. And like the previous ones, I'm not sure if they actually brought in anybody who'll improve the squad. Like, I'm sure you'll have one player who will end up sticking to the wall like Cole Palmer did, but none are guaranteed to be successes. Several of the signings were like Kellyman, talented young players who are unlikely to make an impact on Chelsea this season. Then you have guys like Tosin Adarabioyo, and listen, I like Adarabioyo. If he signed for Palace, I'd be happy, but is he going to be an upgrade on Levi Colwill or Diassi? Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, he had a great season with Leicester, but where does he go in a Chelsea midfield that contains Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez? And then you have Jorgensen, who had a good season, but it was his first ever season in senior football, and it wasn't anything spectacular. I don't think I'd play him over Robert Sanchez. The only signing who I'm really sold on is Pedro Neto, but he's a left-footed winger. That's what Cole Palmer does. He's a left-footed winger too. I guess you could play Palmer as a 10, but then what do you do with Nkunku? I mean, I like Neto. He's a good player, obviously. We saw that at Wolves, but was that the best use of $50 million? And the players who did leave as well, I think that makes Chelsea worse too. Thiago Silva was always going to depart eventually at his age, but I don't think they're ready to lose him. And Conor Gallagher was a very good player. I don't think he would have fit Maresca's system very well, and I understand having him leave, but you knew what you were going to get out of Gallagher. It might have been some trouble adjusting to the new system, but I think they're going to have trouble adjusting anyway. And to lose a surefire thing like Gallagher, it's going to hurt Chelsea, and I think they've gotten worse this summer. And then the team will have to adjust to a new manager. Maresca is from the Pep Guardiola coaching tree, and it can always take teams some time to adjust. I mean, Arteta's probably the best case scenario, and it took Arsenal 3 seasons to get to the Champions League under Arteta. Do you think Bowley has the patience to wait that long? And even if he did, Arteta's the best case scenario. I don't think Chelsea will challenge for the Champions League this year. Now, Chelsea does still have some top players who will be amazing no matter what this season. Cole Palmer has been a great signing. He'll carry Chelsea for years to come as a goal-scoring winger or attacking midfielder. He can do so much. It was a great pickup. And Caicedo's been a really good defensive midfielder as well. But other than them, they're players who I like, but I'm not sold on. Jackson is fine at striker, but I'd like to see him take a step forward. We have to see Nkunku stay healthy. We have to see Fernandez finally live up to expectations and just be better. Cucurella had a very good end to the season and a great Euro, but consistency has been an issue for him, and should I even mention Reece James anymore? And the rest of the team in midfield and out wide and in defense is largely unproven. It's going to be tough for them to adjust to this new system, and like I said before, even if it gets working by the end of the season, I think the best case scenario is finishing in a Europa League spot, and that's kind of what Pochettino did, and Bowley just fired him to play with the next new shiny toy. I'm not too confident at Chelsea's position right now, but there is a good chance that Maresca could have a solid year, they can build on their success with some of the good players they already have, and set themselves up well for the future. But if things don't go perfectly, forget finishing 8th, they might be at the tail end of mid-table. 11th, Crystal Palace. I made a typo. I added an extra 1 to their league finish place. But in all seriousness, Crystal Palace is coming off our best season since our return to the Premier League, with our best manager since our return with Oliver Glasner. There was an amazing end to the season where we were arguably the best team in the league on form by the end of the year. And it will be impossible to maintain that form, especially without Elise, but I'm expecting the positive momentum to continue. While Elise is leaving for Bayern Munich, and he is a big loss, he missed a lot of time last season, and Palace were able to cope without him. We still have Eze, and in addition we're adding Kamada, who's been very good under Glasner in the past, despite a pretty under the radar season at Lazio. I'm expecting him to perform, and maybe we can even have somebody like Mateus França break out and really start to show his talents. And they'll be helped if Mateta is able to continue his form up front. Oliver Glasner really helped turn around his career. He had a good Olympics as well, so I'm expecting him to be able to score goals, and the attack could be very good, and in midfield, things are looking great. Adam Wharton has proven to be a revelation, so good on the ball, good defensively as well. He's a player that I think England hasn't produced since Michael Carrick, probably. I think he's on that level, and he's the next great find Palace made from the Championship. And alongside him, you have either Decore or Lerma, who have both been very good in the past. The defense does have a question mark over the future of Mark Gahey, but even if he does leave, like Elise, Palace are able to do well without him. He missed a lot of Oliver Glasner's tenure. Anderson has been a very good center back. Richards has really looked good since we switched to a back three, and there should be another center back signing if Gahey does leave, but Riyad, Ward, and Klein should be passable. Lerma can play as a center back there as well in the system. Munoz has been a really good signing at right wing back, and Mitchell could continue to impress as well. Dean Henderson, with him having a full season in goal, I'm expecting him to show a bit of improvement as well. I think that this team should be able to continue some positive momentum, though losing Elise and Gahey will hurt, so I am expecting a bit of regression from the team, but their sales will hopefully allow Palace to sign some new players. They've been really good at buying players recently. Wharton is an example of that, Munoz as well, and I'm expecting positive momentum to continue, even if the league place does go back to where Palace has been in the past, and I don't really think there'll be many relegation concerns this season. 12th, Everton. Just like Brentford, Everton is coming off a season where everything went wrong. So many points were deducted, and they underperformed their expected goals massively. But despite that, they survived, and I'm betting on them doing the same this season. It's a Sean Dyche team, so it's going to be well-drilled defensively. Tarkowski and Braithwaite especially are a very good center-back pairing. Braithwaite is likely to get a huge move either this summer or an upcoming season, and you have a really good goalkeeper in Jordan Pickford behind them. Losing Onana in midfield does hurt, but you still have a good player in James Garner, and Sean Dyche teams are always well-drilled defensively. Now, there is a big lack of creativity in the squad. There's no proven goal scorers at all, so that is going to be an issue, but, I mean, hey, this team was able to survive last season, and I really don't see them having too much of an issue. Sean Dyche has been able to keep teams up in the past, and I'm betting on Everton to survive somewhat unremarkably this season. 15th, Fulham. Fulham survived comfortably for the second straight season last year, and I'm expecting them to do the same this season. There are some concerns, one, that they really overperformed their expected goals last season, and two, they're losing a lot of players this year who are crucial to the team. Tim Ream leaves after a long tenure, Tosinado Rabayo is another center back who left, Decordova Reed leaves, and most importantly, João Palhinha left the squad. However, they have been reinforced with the likes of Emmanuel Smith-Rowe and Cuenca as a center back, so I don't think it's too much of a concern. This is still a talented team that should be able to survive. Rodrigo Munoz showed a lot of promise as a striker last season, and he'll be boosted by some creative players behind him in the likes of Iwobi, Wilson, and now Smith-Rowe. They have two good fullbacks in Robinson and Castagna. Bassi had a good season. I'm confident in Cuenca being able to perform as well, though that Palhinha-sized hole in the midfield does limit how good they can be. I do think that Fulham will have an eye towards the relegation zone this season, but I think they won't be dragged to a full-on relegation scrap, and they should be able to survive pretty comfortably at the end of the season. 17th, Ipswich. Kieran McKenna's side secured 2 successive promotions, going from League One to the Championship and from the Championship to the Premier League in 2 seasons. This makes this a very tough task to survive, as you still have players in the squad from the League One days. However, I think they're up to that task. Kieran McKenna's a great manager, and their tactics actually fit pretty well. Unlike the other Championship teams that got promoted, Ipswich don't rely on dominating the ball. They are an attacking team, but they're direct, and that does change to being an underdog very well, a lot better than some of the possession-heavy sides, like Burnley was last season. And unlike Sheffield United and Luton, they've actually invested in the squad pretty heavily this summer. I think the biggest indication that they can survive is that Kieran McKenna stayed. Several big clubs were interested in him after his success with Ipswich, and he decided to stay there. I think because of that, there's something that he sees that leads him to believe they can survive. First off, the defense looks improved and strong. Jacob Greaves signs from Hull City, where he had an impressive season, and I expect him to adjust to the Premier League pretty well. In addition, Ben Johnson comes in to provide defensive solidity at right back, as well as Premier League experience. His signing may allow Axel Tuanzebe to move back to center back, maybe in a back three, where he's shown a lot of promise in the past. And that defensive system will allow Leif Davies to really bomb forward, where he did so well in the Championship last season. He might have even been better than he and Maatsen was for Burnley the year before, and Maatsen just starred for Dortmund in a Champions League final run. In attack, Ipswich has Amari Hutchinson, who was one of the Championship's top players last season, and I'm expecting him to have a good year in the Premier League. You do have George Hurst and Nathan Broadhead as well, though they are currently dealing with injuries. That may allow Liam Delap to get some playing time, and he has shown a good amount of promise in the past, and Kieran McKenna has a habit of getting the best out of his players. I wouldn't be too surprised to see Liam Delap have a really good season. But the fact that I'm mentioning Delap, a striker who couldn't even hit double figures in the Championship last season, shows that this isn't the most talented squad. The midfield especially just isn't near the level of some other Premier League teams, and they do have a tough task, though there are some reason to have faith. Leif Davies and Hutchinson are some real stars who I could expect to have a great season. They have a really good manager in Kieran McKenna. They've got ownerships that invested in them, a lot of positive momentum, and they shouldn't get a points deduction, which isn't something you can say about their other relegation rivals. It is still going to be a very tough task for Ipswich this season, but this is the swing I'm taking this season. I think they're the best equipped Championship team to survive, and I'm going to bet on them staying up. 19th, Leicester. I remember last season, before Oliver Glasner arrived, as a Crystal Palace fan, I was feeling pretty scared about our place in the league. I was looking around the Premier League and going, man, there are so many good teams everywhere. It's going to be tough to leapfrog any of them. I felt a bit better looking at the ineptitude of the bottom three, but when I looked at the Championship and how well Leicester were doing, I felt like, man, if nothing changes, it's going to be so hard to stay up. And I mean, Leicester were very good last season under Maresca. They dominated possession and won the Championship in style. However, unlike Burnley, they were not able to keep hold of their manager. Maresca departed for Chelsea and they replaced him with Steve Cooper. Now, this might have proven to be a blessing in disguise, actually, as it would have allowed them to avoid the traps that Burnley fell into last season. However, it's looking like they may actually replicate Luton and Sheffield United with their frugality. Leicester will likely have a points deduction due to breaking FFP rules. That alone will make things very difficult, but Leicester have another problem in that it really limits how much they can spend, and that means this team has a good amount of holes in it. Jamie Vardy is a legend, obviously, but at his age, he really can't be expected to lead the line for Leicester this season. Mavididi and Fatawu did provide some goals in the Championship, but it's unclear how well that'll translate. We lost a lot of creativity in the midfield as well with Dewsbury Hall leaving. Ndidi and Winks are two good players defensively, but I don't think you can really ask them to do more than that. And while I do like their defense on paper, other than the addition of Okoli, it's the same defense that got relegated, I guess, granted with an upgrade at goalkeeper. It's going to be a tough task for Leicester to survive this season. I do like their squad on paper more than Ipswich is, but Ipswich isn't dealing with a points deduction, and they have Kieran McKenna, who I trust more than Steve Cooper, who really hasn't proven himself in the Premier League as of yet. I think it's going to be tough for Leicester to survive this season. 5th, Liverpool. Liverpool have a new manager and are entering a new era after the departure of Jurgen Klopp. However, other than the arrival of Ernst Slot, this is largely the same team. Liverpool have made no signings as of yet this summer. And while this team is highly rated, Slot comes in highly regarded, it's hard to really tell how good this Liverpool team can be till we actually see them play. Alisson is obviously an amazing goalkeeper. In defense, you have Van Dijk, Trent, Robertson, all amazing. Kwanzaa's coming along well as well. In the midfield, you probably need another addition, but McAllister and Soboslai are great. In attack, you have Salah, who's still world-class, and you have to expect one of Gakpo or Nunez or Jota or Diaz to finally take that step forward and be the world-class replacement for Mane that they really haven't had yet. But teams with that addition can tend to suffer from burnout, and without Klopp there for motivation, I think that's a pretty decent possibility. In addition, there are the concerns about the team adjusting to a new manager in Ernst Slot. I don't want to go too in-depth with Liverpool because they are likely to make some new signings, and that'll make this part seem a bit out of date, but I do have some concerns about the players adjusting to life without Klopp. However, that being said, this is still an immensely talented squad from top to bottom, and I think they'll be able to do well regardless. And remember, even though I've predicted them to finish 5th, if Premier League teams perform well in Europe, which I expect them to do, 5th will be good enough to make the Champions League. First, Man City. As I said in the Arsenal section, Last year, so many things went wrong for City, and they still won the title. Now, De Bruyne, Haaland, and all are healthy, plus guys like Gvardiol and Doku have more experience in Pep Guardiola's system. This team is by far the best team in the league. From back to front, they're elite. Ederson's still great in goal. In defense, you have so many talented players. You have Diaz, Akanji, John Stones if he's healthy, Ake, Gvardiol, Walker, so many good players. In midfield, Rodri is a Ballon d'Or candidate. In front of him, you have the likes of De Bruyne, Foden, Bernardo Silva. And on the wings, you have a motivated Grealish, Doku. I think Oscar Bob could have a breakout campaign. Like, obviously, I don't want to compare him to Cole Palmer because of how good he was last year, but Oscar Bob last season was better than Cole Palmer in the treble season. Obviously, Cole Palmer was way better than Oscar Bob last year, but Bob could break out. And then up front, you have that Viking. Even with the departure of Alvarez, I'm expecting this Man City team to still compete for the title. On the field, we know they're good. The headlines will come off the field, where Man City are facing over 100 charges and face a ton of punishment, including potentially forced relegation. At the moment, I think Man City is the best team in the world, but they might end up going down. We'll have to see. Off the field is where the story will be for Man City this season. If things go perfectly and, let's be honest, justice isn't served, they should win the title pretty easily. And the players, Pep Guardiola and all, they're great, but this might be their last dance. 8th, Manchester United. Last year, United were bad by their standards. They finished 8th, had a negative goal difference, and their underlying numbers suggested they should have been even worse. It was their worst season in the Premier League to date. And they did some interesting things to follow. They decided to keep Erik ten Hag after so much speculation that he would be leaving. He seemed to expect that he'd be leaving after the FA Cup final. But they decided to stick with him, something that I disagree with. And they made some signings that I think are weird. Yaro comes in as a very highly regarded center back. I think he's going to be an amazing player in the future. Real Madrid were interested in him for a reason. Great signing once he returns to health. But he wasn't really a need. Yaro is great because of how young he is. He's such a good reader of the game. He's such a good defensive player, mature well beyond his years, but on the ball, he is a little bit lacking. And that's fine. He's a young player. He's going to improve. But United really need somebody on the ball if they want to change up their style of play from a transition team, and Yaro doesn't do that. Then they signed Xerxes as a striker, and again, I don't really get it. Just like how Yaro probably doesn't add anything that Rafael Varane added, I don't see Xerxes adding something that Højlund couldn't. I mean, he's a big striker with hold-up ability, like Højlund. I guess he could get guys like Garnacho and Bruno involved more than Højlund, but it's a lot to spend on somebody who's probably not going to start unless things go wrong for Højlund, and I'm not sure about that. Then they signed Mazraoui as right back, and listen, nothing against him, but Diego Dallo was one of your only good players last year. Why replace him? You have so many other issues in the squad. Casemiro might be a starter again, and you want to sign a right back? I don't get that. Matthijs de Ligt is the only signing that I feel like really makes sense, but that's just another Erik ten Hag former player, and those signings haven't worked out in the past. United needed to have a good transfer window, and I'm not sure if they did. As stated, Casemiro is still in line to start, despite clearly being past it. On the right-hand side, you have to hope that Diallo is ready to step up, because if not, it's back to Anthony, who's a left-footed Daniel James. I don't think there'll be much improvement in the United squad. Even if the squad did improve, which I'm not completely sold that it did, last season they massively overperformed their expected goals. I think their luck will catch up to them, and some pretty tough losses are going to come their way. I think there's a good chance that by March they're focusing solely on the Europa League, and I don't think it's going to be a very good season for United. 4th, Newcastle. Money's everything in the Premier League, and Newcastle have a lot of it. They finished 7th last season, which is a step down from their 4th place finish the year before, but the 22-23 top 4 finish was ahead of schedule, and without European competition to divide their focus, sole attention on the Premier League, I'm expecting Newcastle to get back to their previous heights. Newcastle were forced to sell 2 good young players, and by forced I mean they have to follow the same rules as everybody else, in Anderson and Minta, but I don't think that'll impact the team too much. Minton never even played for Newcastle, and while Anderson is a good midfielder, I think they're willing to let him go for a reason. Their midfield is very good. Bruno Guimaraes is one of the top midfielders in the entire division, one of the top players, I'd say. Such a good talent. And in addition, while not a new signing, you get Sandro Tonali to come in. After he missed the entire last season, he will be back pretty quickly in this season, and he's going to boost the team tremendously. You also have Joe Linton in midfield to add some talent, Willock as well, and I think Lewis Miley could improve even more this season. He showed a lot of promise as a young player. He might be able to take another step forward this year. And up front, you have a star in Isak who will lead the line and provide a ton of goals. He was great last season. He could be even better with a boosted midfield behind him. And even if he gets injured, you've got a great backup in Callum Wilson. On the wings, you've got Anthony Gordon. He's coming off a really good season as well. And on the other side, not as good with Almiron and Murphy, but they have been solid in the past, and I think Newcastle are still looking to sign somebody there. And speaking of places they're looking to sign somebody, you have their defense. They are heavily linked with Mark Gahey. As a Crystal Palace fan, I'm hoping that won't happen. Come on, let's play some hardball, Steve Parrish. But I could easily see Gahey going to Newcastle, and he would definitely improve their team, but they don't really need him. I mean, Botman and Scher were a very good center-back pairing. Botman should be back from injury relatively quickly into the season, and even if he isn't, you still have Dan Burn as well as Lloyd Kelly, who kind of a baby Dan Burn, to replace him as he starts to get older. And at fullback, you have Lewis Hall. If you don't want to play Burn or Kelly there, Hall was a very good talent. Was impressed with him at Chelsea 2 seasons ago. Didn't play as much with Newcastle this year, but he's been featuring a bit in preseason. I think he could have a breakout campaign. On the right, Trippier has been really solid for Newcastle ever since he signed there. And even as he gets up there in age, you've got Livramento ready to step in and play well. And Nick Pope is a remarkable shot stopper in net, who should be able to save Newcastle some points this season. I think they have a really good team, obviously funded by that money that they have invested in them, and I think it's kind of inevitable that Newcastle will end up joining the Big Six. I mean, you can pretty easily predict where things are going to look at the end of the Premier League season if you look at wage bills, and Newcastle's wage bill is going to get up there. I do like that profit and sustainability rules exist, because it does slow down this growth. I mean, they were put in place because we didn't want to see another Man City. Like, I'm okay with those rules happening, and I do like that it's slowing down Newcastle's rise, but I think it's inevitable that they are going to only continue to improve, and I could see a top 4 finish pretty easily this season. 18th, Nottingham Forest. After 2 seasons of just surviving, I think Forest luck will finally catch up to them and they'll face the drop. Last season, they finished 17th and were pretty clearly the 17th best team in the league, worst team to have stayed up, and I don't think they've improved substantially this season. Now, there are still some good parts to this team. There was a reason they stayed up, and I think the biggest part is their attack is pretty good. You have Chris Wood, who's proven to be a Premier League level striker still, and you have some good support behind him with Callum Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, and Alenga. Some good creative players there. In addition, Murillo is a very good center back. I think expectations should be managed because he is a young center back. It's always difficult for them, but he is a real talent for the future. I don't have too much faith in the rest of the squad, though. The midfield and defense are pretty weak, and there's nobody who really fills me with confidence. The signings of Anderson and Milinkovic will definitely help, but I still think those groups are going to be kind of liabilities. And then the goalkeeping situation is still pretty bad. It was the worst in the league last season, and I don't think it got any better this summer. I don't think the Forest have shown any improvement under Nuno Espirito Santo compared to how they were with Steve Cooper. And after a few years of struggling in the Premier League, I think with the league improving a bit this season, there's nobody like Sheffield United or Luton, probably not even Burnley this year. I think that they're going to go down. Now, it is still going to be tough for the promoted teams. I could easily see, like, Ipswich, who I predicted finish 18th. They could just really struggle and end up finishing 20th, and Nottingham Forest could stay up. But I think out of the teams who were in the Premier League last season, Forest are probably the worst, and I don't want to pick every single team who was promoted last year to go right back down. I don't think that'll happen 2 years in a row. Because of that, I'm predicting Forest to finish 18th. 20th, Southampton. I've kept up with manager Russell Martin over the last few years because I've really liked his style of play. He's used that even when he wasn't at a big club. And now he finally was able to move to Southampton, and he took them to the next level. When he had that good team around him, he was able to get Southampton to perform, and they were able to get promoted to the Premier League. But Martin sticks with his principles. He was even playing that possession-heavy style when he was at MK Dons and Swansea, and they didn't have great teams. And the teams, while they were fun to watch, I think he is a good manager, they didn't overperform to the extent that somebody like Kieran McKenna's Ipswich Town did. Because of that, I'm expecting Southampton to kind of struggle in the Premier League, because they don't have that talent advantage that they did last season. And it could be tough. I do like Haywood Bellis. I think he's a very good center back, one for the future to watch. He'll be great in this system as well. And I like a good amount of their signings, but it's not ideal for a survival campaign. Their midfield isn't really stout defensively like Leicester's and Ipswich is, and they certainly don't have the talent to impose themselves on a Premier League midfield. Their forwards aren't superb either. Brighton Diaz is a good player. He had a pretty good run out with Sheffield United last season, but I don't think you expect too much out of him. And they lost Shea Adams, so you're going to have to rely a good amount on Adam Armstrong, who, but he's kind of a modern-day Dwight Gale. And I'm a fan of Dwight Gale. I loved him at Crystal Palace, but he's not somebody who you really want to lead the line during a survival campaign. Again, I like a good amount of players in that Southampton squad. I'm a huge fan of Russell Martin as manager. Honestly, if he didn't get promoted this year, I think he probably would have ended up as the Brighton manager. But I don't see this going any differently than Vincent Kompany's attacking Burnley team went last season. And honestly, they're less talented than Burnley was. So I don't really see a way for Southampton to stay up this season. If they do, it'll probably be them firing Martin pretty early on, and I don't want that to happen. I think there's a good chance that they are somewhat comfortable going back to the Championship and going at it again in the Premier League. I do like this team. As I've said before, I like Martin, but it's going to be tough this year. Third, Tottenham. Tottenham had an impressive first season under Ange Postecoglou, and I expect them to continue to improve. They made a marquee signing up front with Dominic Solanke, who not only replaces Harry Kane, but allows Son to drop deeper into his preferred position. In addition, the entire squad will have a year under Postecoglou, and they should only continue to improve. While I mentioned the two starring attacking players, the improved depth will really help them as well. Brendan Johnson, Kulusevski, and Richarlison give them a lot of good attacking options. In midfield, you have Maddison, who benefits from a full summer of rest, alongside Basuma, who had a really good season last season. He might even continue to get better. And you also have a new signing in Archie Gray, who looks like a real talent. Definitely going to be a great player in the future, but I think he might be able to have an immediate impact on Tottenham this year. And then in defense, they've got a defense who can match any back four in the entire league. Aduki and Porro were two great wingbacks last season. Aduki adjusted to the Premier League so well, and Romero and Van de Ven are one of the top center-back pairings in the league. And then you've got a great goalkeeper in Vicario behind them. I think the starting 11 of Tottenham can match Man City and can match Arsenal. It's just the depth that's a concern. Depth still hasn't improved much. If Romero or Van de Ven or Aduki get injured, Ben Davies is going to be a starter for Tottenham. He'll probably see a lot of minutes this year. If James Maddison gets injured, Tottenham don't have a replacement for him. If Basuma goes down, they're in trouble. I think that depth is a big problem for Tottenham this year. But if they're able to stay completely healthy, as I said before, they could mount a title challenge. I think that they have players to really compete with Man City and Arsenal, and could get some wins over them this year. But if they get too many players injured too early, they could be languishing around 7th. I have enough confidence in the core of the team to predict them to finish 3rd. I think they'll be able to get back to the Champions League. And even if they don't, they'll have the Europa League to focus on. I think that Tottenham have a lot of positive momentum going, but they need to get the depth in place before they can really mount a good title challenge. 13th, West Ham. West Ham are coming off another solid season where they finished 9th and had a good Europa League run. And they followed that off by having one of the best summers out of any Premier League team, bringing in some good signings as well as a top manager in Julian Lopetegui. Because of that, I am very excited about West Ham's future. But I think there'll be some growing pains. West Ham have tried to get away from David Moyes' counter-attacking style of play in the past, and it's never really gone well. In addition, they massively overperformed their expected goals last season, so there should be some regression. Because of that, I think there will be a pretty tough start to the season for West Ham, kind of similar to what Bournemouth faced last year, but by the end of the season, I'm expecting them to be in great shape. The signing of Fulkrug as a focal point is a great addition with some amazing creators behind him. Bowen, Paqueta, Kudus, I think you can add in Mikel Antonio now. That's one of the best groups of wingers and attacking midfielders in the entire division. Then you have Alvarez, Rodriguez, as well as Soucek as some solid defensive midfielders. I like the signing of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. We know his defensive abilities, and he's done well in possession-heavy systems in the past. And you do have a great center-back addition in Max Kilman. I think there will be some issues building out of the back at the beginning of the season, with the defense and midfield especially. And because of that, I think West Ham will stumble out of the gates and could have a pretty rough start to the season. But as I said before, by the end of the season, I think they'll be in really good shape, kind of similar to what Crystal Palace did under Oliver Glasner last year. And while I don't think they'll have a great league finish, I think there's a good chance West Ham will have a really good cup run this season. 16th, Wolves. Wolves were able to survive pretty easily last season, despite me picking them to go down. And I'm expecting them to survive again this season, though it will be a lot tougher. They lost two of their top players in Max Kilman and Pedro Neto and haven't replaced them. Because of that, I think they'll be drawn into a relegation battle this season. But I have enough faith in Gary O'Neill and co. that I think they'll be able to stay up. Cunha and Hwang Hee-chan were solid up front, getting 24 goals between them. Behind them, you have Lamina and Gomez, who are two good defensive midfielders, and the back five should provide them with ample cover. And Jose Sal's one of the league's best shot stoppers behind them. This is a pretty talented Wolves team. That being said, there's a big lack of creativity, especially with Neto's departure. Cunha will be relied on a lot, and if he gets injured, Wolves could be in trouble, especially if Hwang Hee-chan stops overperforming his expected goals. And with the departure of Max Kilman, things are going to be difficult for the defense. But despite all that, I do have enough confidence in this team. Gary O'Neill's proven to be a good manager, and he finally has a full summer to work with his team. He didn't have that at Bournemouth or at Wolves. And this is a Wolves team that has survived a long time in the Premier League. I'm trusting their experience, and I think Wolves will be able to stay up. And there we have it, my preview and prediction for the upcoming Premier League season. Man City as champions unless it happens. For Champions League spots, you have Arsenal, Tottenham, Newcastle, and probably Liverpool, while Nottingham Forest, Leicester, and Southampton go down. Please let me know your prediction in the comments below. Curious to see what you guys think. Let me know if I screwed up tremendously with your club as well. And with that, if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. See ya.